Hello everybody and welcome to episode 3 of Lockdown with Max. Today's guest is someone a little different. Sam Oldham is an English artistic gymnast who represents Great Britain. He was part of the British men team at the 2012 Summer Olympics that won bronze in the team competition. He's also a 3-time junior European champion and has won individual horizontal bar gold at the 2010 Summer Youth Olympics in Singapore. Sam, long intro. Great to speak to you today. How are you coping in lockdown, first of all?
Well, thanks for having me, Max. Obviously, these are super strange times, so it's been crazy for me as everyone, trying to get used to it, trying to adjust. I think yesterday was the 7th week of me not being in the gym, being able to do gymnastics. So it's been tough, man. It's been really difficult. A lot of adjusting, like I said, but starting to kind of level things out now. You know, get a bit of a routine. I have like a quiz on a Wednesday that I do every week with my friends. That gives me a bit of a marker so I can kind of track week to week, because I'm not sure if you felt this, but I think a lot of people have kind of lost track of the days, and it's
exactly
a bit weird. Yeah.
How have you found training in lockdown? Has it been easier than you thought or harder than you thought to train for something? What you do is gymnastics. How have you trained in lockdown?
Yeah, I think doing the sport that I do, gymnastics, obviously it's a little bit easier. You know, if I was a swimmer, I can't just jump in the bath and do, like, it don't work like that. But gymnastics, I'm doing body weight training. I can do handstands. I can do conditioning, stretching. I did manage to get a small pommel horse from the gym the day that we got locked down. So there's things that I can do. I've got an old trampoline in my garden that I used when I was a kid. So I kind of cleaned that, and it's not snapped on me yet. So we're doing all right with that. But yeah, just trying to make the best of the situation. But I'm still training 2 to 3 hours a day, which is pretty good, really, and that gives me a bit of structure throughout the day.
So when you are training in lockdown, then how are you coping with the whole thing of not having maybe a coach or somebody to support you with it? Are you kind of making up, workouts and things to do off the top of your head?
So I think for me personally, I spent a lot of time training by myself with just my coach. So my situation, I was based out of Loughborough University for about 6 years, and a lot of that time we were spent just one-on-one, 6 hours a day. So I'm very good at spending that time inside my own head and motivating myself. You know, I've never been one that's needed other people to push me. You know, my coach could have left me in the gym by myself when I was probably 11 years old, and I would have done more training than I was supposed to. So he didn't think I was cheating on the training. So that's my kind of character. But it is difficult because I do enjoy, I really enjoy bouncing off the other kids in the gym, especially the young ones as well. I decided to move back to train in Nottingham after the 2016 Olympics because I wanted to do one more cycle, and I wanted to be in a club environment with loads of people around me where there's an atmosphere, and I wanted to give back to those younger ones a little bit. So it was actually quite surreal. That last day that we left the gym, the last thing I saw was all the little lads. They were playing a game of football on the floor. So there was like 30 of them just playing a massive game of football on the floor. And it was quite a sad moment, actually. It was like, and I said goodbye to the coaches, and it was kind of like, I don't know when I'm going to see you again. And that's been nearly 2 months now. So, yeah, for me, I've missed that. But what I tend to do is I actually do all my warm up in my bedroom. It's quite a small little place that I've got up there, but I can get everything done because it's quite a static warm up. And I normally put on like a podcast or some music. And because I'm an older guy now, it takes me about an hour to do all my full warm-up before I'm ready to go. So I'll spend my time up there, then I'll make my way out into the garden if the sun's shining, got some decking. I do like my conditioning, my pommel horse. But yeah, just trying to keep myself motivated. I've been doing some live streams. So I've actually got kids all the way from California, getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning to follow my live streams to do the sessions with me, which is pretty cool.
I've had lots of guests on Lockdown with Max so far, more media related, Caroline Barker, Michelle, and I always ask them how they got into their industry. So the question from me to you, Sam, to start off with really, is how you got into gymnastics. Talk to me literally from the beginning.
Okay, so yeah, I think it's probably quite a common story amongst athletes, but I was super hyper when I was a kid. So I think now I would have been diagnosed with ADHD. I just couldn't sit still. I was always that kid at school that would rock back on his chair, and then every now and then I'd fall over. And if someone said, no, you're not allowed to do that, I'd kind of like test the waters and push the boundaries a bit. And it was a school teacher that suggested to my mum that she took me along to the local gymnastics club. And I remember my first ever session, it was in like the local leisure centre. And back then, gymnastics was not popular for guys to do. And my first session was me and 15 girls in this session. But I loved it straight away because I could basically just run around like a crazy child. Nobody was telling me off. I was doing that at home, jumping from the sofa to the other sofa and like trying to almost play the floor as lava around my mum's living room, breaking ornaments and picture frames. So I loved it straight away, and I never looked back after that. At that time, I was playing football as well, so I started playing for the local team. And like I said, in the early days, gymnastics wasn't popular. So yeah, there were kids that would say stuff when I was younger, like, oh, you're wearing a leotard and all of this kind of stuff. But then, like in PE, I'd take my shirt off, and when you see an 8-year-old kid with a like six-pack, it looks really weird, and they'd soon like quieten down. And then as I got older and I got better, and I started to get some really good results, my classmates and the school started to, if I got a big competition result, the headmaster would get me up and stuff, and people started to understand the amount of work I was doing, because when I was 9 years old, I was already training at 6 o'clock in the morning before primary school. And then I'd go to primary school, and sometimes I'd fall asleep in the first lesson because I was just working so hard. But yeah, that's how I got into it, really. And gymnastics is one of them sports, like, once you're in the bubble, it's hard to leave. It's tough to kind of get out of it.
Sam, you mentioned there that you were also a footballer. I think you were a very talented one indeed. You played for Notts County and received offers from Forest and Derby County. Why did you decide to turn football down and go for the gymnastics route?
Yeah, so it's funny how like stories can stick with you as well. And like, I'm 27 now. I remember my last game of football I played for school. I was at Rushcliffe School in West Bridgford. I remember it. I think we played like Top Valley or someone. I scored 2 goals. I can remember walking off the pitch and thinking that's the last time I'll ever play a game. But for me, like at the age of 12, I went to represent Great Britain in Austria at my first international competition. And I did really well, and I won that competition. And I stood on the podium and the national anthem was playing. And it was the same time that the Olympic Games were on TV in 2004 in Athens. So they both coincided. And I can remember watching that games and thinking, that's what I want to do when I'm older. And when I heard that national anthem, I was like, yeah, this is me. I want to go to an Olympic Games. I want to represent my country. And I think at that point, I had sacrificed so much for gymnastics. So although I was really good at football and I was on a 4-year contract at the time, guaranteed till I was 16 at Notts County, it just, for me, gymnastics was like that ultimate challenge. It was so tough. And that's the challenge side of it was the thing that I really latched onto. And yeah, I made that decision, although it was really, really difficult because my family background is all football. So my granddad was at Notts County, my dad was at Forest. So everyone was very surprised when I picked gymnastics, obviously, because it's super left field. I've got no family background in it. But obviously, looking in hindsight now, it was a great decision.
So when you were playing football for Notts County, then you were still training for gymnastics, were you?
Yeah. So what I would do is, at about the age of 11, I was training about 40 hours a week in the gym doing gymnastics. So I'd get up at 6 in the morning. My dad would drive me to the gym. I'd run around this field in the freezing cold. I'd train for 3 hours, go to school, come back, train for 3 more hours. I get picked up, go to football training, finish football training at 9 o'clock at night, get home at 10, get up at 6 o'clock the next morning. And then my days off from gymnastics on a Sunday were my match days. And to be honest, because the gymnastics was so hard, the match days and playing 90 minutes was a rest for me, and I used to love it and enjoy it. And I could play football. The difference for me between gymnastics and football, I think, was I could play football all day long for 12 hours and never get bored and have a smile on my face. But the gymnastics was tough. It was real hard. And I'm super competitive. I think it was the competitive streak in me that drew me to gymnastics, I think.
When did you have your first kind of major competition that you can remember as a young lad? Or
yeah, I guess my first ever competition was really early on, so it was with school. So I went to represent my school. I did really well, and I was scouted to go to the local club, which was Nottingham at the time. So I always tell this story because I go into schools quite a lot and chat to the young kids. But I can remember my first session really well. I went in there, and there's like a waiting room. It's kind of like just your normal kind of double doors with a window pane in the top. And I couldn't see the window pane, so my dad had to lift me up to look into the gym. And I'd never seen gymnastics before. Like, my mind was blown. It was crazy. I'd never seen anything like that. I'd just seen football, cricket, athletics maybe on TV, rugby. And I saw a kid swinging around the high bar. And he was doing what's called a giant. And that's where you go all the way around. And I didn't know what it was. I was just mesmerized. And there was a lady stood next to me and my dad. And she said, if you come and you start training here, you work really hard, you'll be able to do that one day. And from that moment, I was just transfixed. And I had a trial. I was really unflexible when I was a kid, so I didn't do very well at that. But I was really strong and tough. and the coach said, okay, we're going to give you a chance. And yeah, that was my first competition, which led to me starting up properly. But I think my first big international was that one in Austria. Obviously, I was 12. I left home for the first time on an aeroplane without my mum and dad. So that was cool. I'd never been to like a country like Austria. It was snowing, I think. We were right up in the mountains. We were competing against the Russian kids and the Japanese kids. That was really cool. And then I think the big one was probably that Youth Olympic Games that you mentioned at the start in 2010. That was a massive event. You know, there was the likes of, we had me there, Tom Daly was there, Jade Jones. You know, these people have all gone on to win Olympic medals. So that was a massive occasion for me.
In 2010, Sam, just like you said there, European Gymnastic Championships, you won 3 gold medals, becoming the European Junior Champion, which led to you winning the Junior Sportsperson of the Year Award at the Nottinghamshire Sports Awards. You were also nominated for the BBC's Young Sports Personality of the Year Award. I'm guessing 2010 was a pretty good year for you.
Yeah, it was a pretty good year. I always look back at 2010 with a lot of fond memories. I think that's when I really, because at that point gymnastics was still quite new. You know, we had Lewis Smith, who had just won a medal at the Olympics in Beijing, a bronze medal. And honestly, before that, it wasn't an option for gymnasts to have a career in this sport. When I started, we were ranked 23rd in the world. All of the senior guys had full-time jobs, so they were like firemen and bricklayers. So you were just doing it for the passion, but it kind of changed, and we won the bid for the London 2012 Olympics. And 2010, I think I really kind of laid a marker out there to the other guys in the UK and the older guys to say, look, I want one of these spots for 2012, and I'm going to be pushing these older guys that are on the team. And I also made my senior debut at 17. I got taken to the World Championships later that year. So it really was a special year for me. I got picked up by Red Bull as well, which was an amazing thing. So I started working with them at the age of 17. So it really was just a lot happened in a really short space of time, but incredible memories.
So when you were competing at the 2010 European Gymnastic Championships, did you kind of, when you were doing it, kind of look back and think, well, wow, and I deserve this because I've worked so hard? And like you said earlier, with getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and training so hard and training for 3 hours before primary school and before just high school and everything like that, did you ever look back and think, yeah, I deserve this? And you must have been pretty happy with yourself, or did you always try and remain focused?
Yeah, I think a lot of elite sportsmen, their mindset is always on the next event. And that's one thing I look back on, and I wish I'd really appreciated a little bit more and took the time to smell the roses almost. Because for me, I would do a competition, and then literally the next day my brain was, okay, what can I learn for the next competition? How can I improve? I never really took the time to appreciate the achievements. And when I was 17, I clearly remember going to the World Championships, and I shared a room with the oldest guy on the team, and he was 27 at that point. And I can remember thinking, God, this guy's so old. Like, I'm not going to be doing gymnastics when I'm 27. And literally like that, I'm 27 right now. And it's scary to think how fast that time went. So I never sat back to think, oh, I deserve this because of all the work I've put in, especially at that point, because the end goal was always the Olympics. So it always felt like I was so far away from that. And I didn't have, you almost can't risk sitting back to think about how far you've come. You know, you don't want to jinx it. There's a lot of like, you get a lot of athletes, I'm sure, and footballers that have a bit of like OCD and all of that kind of stuff. You know, they put the left boot on first. You get a lot of that in gymnastics. Gymnastics is one of them sports where it's impossible to be perfect. So it's like these hidden things you don't really talk about, you know. So for me, yeah, I never really did sit back and go, oh, wow, there was so much work that I put in. It's only now, towards the end of my career, I can really appreciate those car journeys with my dad at 6 o'clock in the morning for years on years, you know. I can remember actually a really funny story. We used to watch this girl. She used to run at 6 o'clock every morning. And we'd drive to the gym. Me and my dad used to make this story up and be like, oh, imagine if she like ends up going to the Olympics and she's a runner. And we often say, I wonder what happened to that girl we used to watch running every morning. But it's funny, you think back to that when you get older. But one thing I think I will bring up, because it's quite cool, because I just found it the other day. Now we've been on lockdown, I'm going through all my old stuff. And I found a piece of paper. It's an A4 sheet of paper. And my dad printed it out, and it said Sam Oldham, London 2012, Team GB, Olympic medalist. And he put that on the back of my wardrobe when I was, it was in 2006 or 2005. So about 7 years before the London 2012 games. And I would see that every morning when I put my clothes on to go to the gym. And I found it the other day, and it was, it's funny how you can have a dream at such a young age and be really focused. I think that probably set me apart when I was younger.
Before we get on to the 2012 Olympics and talk about your achievements within that, I thought we'd kind of just touch on, as an athlete, a gymnast, someone who trains so hard, footballers like you just mentioned, there must have been some setbacks, injuries, I'm guessing, for you, Sam?
Yeah, so I'm one of those guys that is always in getting injured. I'm one of those kids. I've always been that way. I'm always tripping over something. I think it's because I push the boundaries all the time. I was trying to work it out the other day. I think I'm close to like 20 broken bones now. But yeah, when I was younger, I had quite a few injuries as well. So I think early on, during that time, I suffered quite a lot with a collarbone injury. So I had a stress fracture in my collarbone. That was mainly down to doing gymnastic skills that I wasn't physically ready to do yet. One of the things that was difficult was when I came around, I was kind of like the first kid that was really pushing the difficulty in this country on some of the apparatus. So even with the coaches, it was like a trial and error. So we potentially did things that I shouldn't have done at that age. I was only 17. I wasn't fully developed, especially my chest area. It couldn't take the load of, I don't know if you've seen the parallel bars, but sometimes you land on your biceps. And it was those skills that gave me this kind of developed this injury. And I had a stress fracture, and that set me back a long way. That was a very difficult time for me, that injury.
We'll go on to the 2012 Olympics now. I mean, that must have been a pretty surreal moment for you. Dreams must come true then. For me, one of my goals in life is to go and report at the Olympics, and go and, whether that's make a video or go and present something. How was it being around the Olympic event? The 2012, it was in London, your own country. It must have just been so special.
It was, you can't, the one thing you can't prepare for is an Olympic Games. You can go to the World Championships, like the European Champion. It's just on a different scale. We were competing in front of millions of people. There was, the first day that I walked out into the O2 for the qualification, I was the first man up. I was the youngest man in the team. We were on the rings. And what they did was, in the O2 arena, they kept all the lights off on the first day. So you'd walk up in gymnastics, it's raised up on a podium. So you go up some steps, then you line up in front of the judges, and then they read out each athlete's name. And as they did that, as we stood up on the podium, the lights rose to the top, and there were 20,000 people. And most of those people were there to support us. So it's just Union Jacks everywhere. And like the noise was deafening. And when you watch the X Factor, you often listen to the judges say, "Oh, that made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up." And I'm always kind of like, nah, they're having me on. That doesn't really happen. But everywhere across my body, all the hairs stood up. It was like electricity. And I've only ever felt that twice in my life. And that was one of the occasions. And it was just a surreal experience. I mean, even afterwards, once we had won that medal, because we weren't expected to even be in the final. So to have won a medal was completely just a bonkers experience. And we had like royalty watching us. I can remember we got whizzed straight to the BBC studios. I can remember walking through a door and Lennox Lewis was stood there, and he's like 7 foot tall. I'm like, whoa, that's Lennox Lewis. And then went and met like Gary Lineker, and all of this stuff was just happening so fast. I was only 19, so it was hard for me to really appreciate what was going on. But incredible experience.
Here's a question for you. Some footballers and probably some athletes, when they kind of become known in the public eye and have to do media interviews and stuff, they sometimes struggle with the interviews. Did you ever struggle being interviewed by someone? Did you kind of learn over time, or were you always good at talking from a young age and kind of coming across well on camera?
It's definitely a skill, and it's something you have to work at. So for me, one of the greatest gifts my dad ever gave me was he worked out very early on that gymnastics wasn't a sport where you could make a career at this point. This was when I was 10, 11, 12. And he knew that if I was gonna have a career in this and make some money out of this, then I needed to get myself out there. I needed to put my face out there. So if I had a good result, he would get the local news in. It might be papers or BBC East Midlands. They'd come to the gym if I become British champion. And I was almost like pushed in front of the camera. And I used to hate it when I was younger. I did not like attention at all. I used to avoid it at all costs. But by the time I got to about 15, 16, and I started doing these bigger competitions for Great Britain, the head of media for British Gymnastics would come up and say, "Oh, look, guys, we need someone to do an interview." And all the other guys would be like, "No chance," they'd run a mile. And I'd say, well, I'll do it. And not because I liked it, but I just said, I'll do it. I don't mind. And then I realized as I got a little bit older and the more I did, I was like, oh, this isn't too bad. Like, I don't mind this too much. So one of the best gifts he ever gave me, my dad, was to put me in front of the camera early on, because since then I've gone on to work with Sky Sports, do a lot of work there. I've done commentary with the BBC, did some commentary at the Olympic Games, and for me it's something that I really enjoy. I love conversation. I've got my own podcast, so yeah, I think it definitely is a skill that you need to work on and you constantly need to get better at. I have had interviews that I've found very difficult and daunting and hard.
You've been helping me out on some challenges with MITA recently. You did some videos for me. We were speaking on a phone call before I kind of invited you on Lockdown with Max, and you were telling me about career mentors, and you've got quite an interesting story, haven't you, at Sky Sports with Jeff?
Yeah, so I was very lucky to become a Sky Sports scholar in 2013. So Sky basically took on 12 athletes who were aiming for the 2016 Olympic Games and 2017 Winter Olympic Games. And part of that initiative was to pair each athlete up with a mentor. With the guys knowing my background in football and family background, they paired me up with Jeff Shreves, which was incredible. I couldn't believe it. I met Jeff. At first, he was almost a bit nervous about how he was going to help me because he knew nothing about gymnastics. But I said, there's so much you can teach me, like I'm interested in having a career in, sports journalism and maybe commentary in the future. And that's what you do. That's what you've done for decades. So, we created a really cool relationship. He'd tell me loads of gossip about footballers and managers and stuff every time we met up. So I used to love it. And it was really good. And he took me along to games as well sometimes, just to experience how he worked, how he interviewed was really, really interesting. And even life advice. I went through a few difficult times towards the end of my time as part of the scholarships program. And Jeff was someone that I could ring, and also my dad as well, for advice. So he was invaluable for me. And kind of the culmination of the end of my time on the scholarships program was actually I spoke at Sky's annual finance conference in Edinburgh and London. And there was, hundreds of people watching to give a 20-minute speech. So actually, Jeff, I did a Skype call, kind of like what we're doing, and he got me to read out my speech, and he basically tore me to shreds. It was brutal, but it was really, really helpful. And then by the time I got there and I actually did it, I felt super comfortable with, my story and what I was delivering, and it went down really well. So that was a great experience for me, and we still stay in touch now.
What does the future hold for you, Sam? Now, I think you mentioned earlier when we're doing this that maybe your career was coming to an end, and you mentioned about maybe doing something to do with sports commentary after. How can you see it all kind of panning out in the next few years for you?
Yeah, so for me, I was actually supposed to retire in lockdown. So I had aimed to retire at the British Championships, which were at the beginning of April. So this was a really strange time for me. I've kind of had to sit back and speak with my coach, and I've decided to give myself some time to sit on it. I definitely want to compete one more time. I feel like it's kind of an unfinished chapter. For me, it's really important now that I finish on a positive experience at the end of my career. The last few years have been very tough for me. Last year, I had a battle with mental health issues. So for me, it's really important that I have a positive experience at the end, because I want to still be able to watch the sport in 5 years, 10 years time. I've got a lot of ex-teammates that have kind of left the sport with a lot of resentment, and I imagine that they probably can't watch gymnastics on TV when it's there, because there's a lot of pain, because sport is tough, right? It's not all what everybody sees on TV. Sometimes there's a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it can be very difficult. So for me, I'm just trying to almost fall in love with the sport again before I actually do finish. But I am contemplating the idea of carrying on till next summer. It's something that's in my ballpark. I'm the type of athlete that's very much into like marginal gains. So like I was just telling you before, I've been learning Japanese for 2 years. So it'd be nice to put that into practice. But we'll see what happens. I think my plan right now, Max, is just not to have a plan. My life has been so structured for 2 decades now. I've been doing gymnastics 20 years this year. And every decision I make is kind of based on my training the next day. So my plan is to almost just not have a plan, see what happens. But I really want to go traveling. So I'd like to go traveling for 18 months and then come back and go, okay, what do I want to do now with the next chapter?
So because obviously the 2020 Olympics have been postponed due to COVID-19, whenever they are but I don't know if they're going to be rescheduled next year or whenever. So we won't see you at the Olympics, or will we see you at the Olympics maybe doing some commentary?
Potentially, mate. That is something we spoke about. I got in touch with the guys at Sky Sports start of the year. Just said, just a heads up, guys. I'm thinking of potentially retiring in April. I've been learning Japanese for the past 2 years. I think they have one of the current Sky scholars, name's Joe Fraser. He's a world champion right now. So they've got a vested interest in the Tokyo Olympics. And I said, I'd love to get involved if that's doing a podcast or doing some kind of commentary, because I do really enjoy that side of things. And I think that'd be a good way for me to stay involved with the sport as well. But we'll see. But the idea is floating around. It is up there, me carrying on and trying to go for one more Olympic Games. It's a big decision. It's tough. We're very good at gymnastics in Great Britain right now. So there's probably 20 guys going for 4 spots on that team. So it's very cutthroat. It's very difficult. But we'll see how I feel. I'm getting the bug. I'm struggling a little bit this week. I want to be swinging around the high bar again, doing backflips. So we'll just see what happens. But yeah, my main goal is just to have a positive experience at the end of my career.
Fingers crossed for you, Sam. Good luck. Thank you so much for coming on Lockdown with Max today. Really appreciate it, and stay safe.
Thanks, Max. You too, mate.
No problem at all. Everybody remember to follow Sam. I'm sure you'll see him. He could be commentating. I mean, we could be doing it together, Sam. You never know.
Something.
If you have enjoyed this video, remember to drop it a like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time on Lockdown with Max. Cheers.